So hello and welcome to Kitty Talks. We share inspirational life stories that empower you to create yours. And today I have with me a very special guest. He's an internationally renowned transformation coach, Michael Neill. Welcome.
Hello.
And actually, it's not true. We actually have two guests today. So Michael has been very kind enough to join us, and we also have Sergeant Pepper. So you can tilt your camera down.
I don't know. Perhaps you get in there. Get in there. Show up there. Yeah, we go. There's a little kind of an extreme close up there. But,
and for those of you listening on audio, we have a puppy. We have a puppy in the podcast house today.
The puppy cast.
The puppy, yes, exactly. But Michael, thank you so much for joining us. He's also known as a super coach, and he's author of 6 books and has over 25 years experience in this amazing industry. So I'm very excited to have you on to share your life story with Kitty Talks.
Thank you for having me.
So obviously I know you as veteran, I suppose, would be a good description. You know, you are very well-known industry super coach, and I would love for you to just take us back, if that's okay, because obviously you've been in this industry for a long time, well respected, but one of the things our audience is really interested in is how you got into doing the work you're doing on the planet. So if it's okay, I'd love you to take us back a little bit and tell us how you transitioned into the work you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite funny to go back far enough, because as a kid, I wanted to either play football, be a sportscaster, or maybe a lawyer, because I liked arguing. And astronaut was in there for a while too. Like you know, it was that was the kind of range of things I thought I would do in my life. Then I started acting in school, and that worked well. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll be an actor. And while all that was going on, all of my plans and schemes, I got what I now know as depression. At the time, I just thought life sucked.
Yeah.
And it went from about 13 years old, and it just got worse and worse. And I had all sorts of things that I look back on now and go, wow, I was really messed up. But I wasn't from a family where one talked about such things.
I can relate to that.
So it was just like, this is life, it kind of sucks, but oh well. And it came to a head when I was 19. I was at university, and I had an experience. I talk about it at length in my TEDx talk, but it felt basically like I was being sucked out of a 4th floor window by a giant vacuum cleaner from hell. Is the best way that I can put it. And I was hanging onto the wall to not go out the window. And there was a phone, and I called the suicide hotline, and I got a busy signal.
No.
And I just thought that was hysterical. Like, I thought, short of lightning striking me in the room, that was the funniest thing that could happen.
Wow.
So that kind of popped me out of it, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And a friend came and got me, and I spent the night with her, and I woke up the next morning, and it dawned on me that even though I'd been thinking about killing myself for years at that point, I didn't want to kill myself.
Wow.
Like, I honestly didn't know that. I assumed because I thought about it, that meant I wanted to do it.
Yes.
And I didn't understand thought is just something that happens in your head. It isn't you. And that was a big moment for me, because it became, I'd still had the thought, but it just became the suicide thought. Like, it stopped seeming like meaningful. It was just, the suicide thought. And I got really interested in that phenomenon. I'd had a few other experiences like that when I was younger, where my perspective changed and the world looked different. and I didn't know why. So I got into psychology and spirituality and studied everything. I've always been a voracious reader and student, and sort of anything that would help, creative visualization and meditation. And I finally, in the 80s, late 80s, was at drama school in London. And I came across this book by Tony Robbins that, it was more obscure in England than it was here, called Unlimited Power. And I read it, and there was an exercise in chapter 2 where he said, find the volume knob for the voice in your head and turn it down. Now, I didn't know there was a volume knob for the voice in my head, but I experienced a kind of a meditative peace of mind like I hadn't experienced in years. Now, in retrospect, looking back on it, that experience took me on an 18-year sidetrack.
Okay.
Because the book said, we have 1,000 techniques like that to control your mind. And I went, great. And I became an NLP practitioner. I became an NLP master practitioner. I became a trainer. I became a master trainer. I wound up being one of the leading trainers doing, 600 plus people trainings in London with Dr. Richard Bandler and Paul McKenna. Richard created the field.
Yes.
And all of that was happening. And I was working with clients. But I was basically just still a high-functioning depressive. I mean, I was doing great in the world. I was okay. But I always knew that I was about 2 weeks away from going back into depression. That was sort of just, I figured out how to beat the broken, or so I thought.
Yeah.
And that was fine, but it bugged me slightly through all those years, even though we helped a lot of people, that we weren't the happiest people in every room. Like, given what we knew about the mind, it struck me that anyone who did what we did should be super happy and rich and successful. Like why weren't we awesomer? And, we weren't bad, but, we weren't special. And I thought we should be special given what we were doing. And then I had an epiphany, and it was bizarre and unlooked for. But I was working, I was reading a book on relationships, and I hate relationship books generally because they're always I always think, well, that might work great for the author, but it doesn't strike me as how I talk to my wife or anything like that. And I had just had an extraordinary experience of amnesia for my biggest, Nina and I, we've been together forever, but we used to have what I call the annual argument.
Okay.
And once a year, we would get into an argument about something. And it almost didn't matter what. It was it's the annual argument. And we were in the middle of it when I was reading this book. And then my friend who loaned me the book said, how are things? And I said, great. He said, how are things with Nina? And I said, great. And he said, what about the argument? And I said, what argument? And it took him a couple of minutes to remind me that we'd been in the middle of the annual argument. Because something had happened when I read that book that changed it. And I didn't, literally, I had amnesia for it. I didn't remember. And it somehow impacted Nina as well, because, she wasn't, as far as I could tell, arguing with me. Well, I just had to know everything about that.
Yeah,
and I went, and there was no real name to the field. They called it psychology of mind. And then some people called it health realization. And some people were calling it neocognitive psychology. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I thought, cool, let's learn it. And I went up there to kind of basically, they kept telling me they had no techniques. It was just conversation. And I was like, I'll find the technique because that's my expertise. And if they really do, I thought genuinely, I thought either I haven't paid them enough to tell me what they do yet.
Yeah, sure.
Which is cool. It's proprietary or whatever. I'm okay with that. Or maybe they don't know why what they do works, but my expertise, and as an NLP modeler, I can take it apart and show them. And I went up there. My business partner was very excited because he knew I was going up there to to get this new technology. And about 2 days into a 4-day session, I just got it. I just got that I was watching this guy, Sid Banks, who was behind this field, talk, and he said, every human being is sitting in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it. And somehow I heard that. Like I heard that at a level where I absolutely knew in my soul that was true, that I had never been broken, that I was born happy, that I wasn't a depressive. I just thought I was. Like I just thought all the time about it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty depressing.
Yes.
And I laughed. I was actually drinking a beer when this happened, and like beer came out of my nose. I laughed so hard because my entire adult life, the first 18 years of my adult life, had been devoted to overcoming depression, anxiety, stress, pressure, all of these things I thought I suffered from. Yeah. And I'd been pretty successful at it, not seeing that they weren't me in the first place. They weren't who I was. They were things that were the fruits of thought in me.
And do you think at that moment you had almost like a consciousness shift? You managed to sort of see
yes.
it from a different perspective and sort of...
Yeah, I think that's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah.
Literally, the elevator went up.
Yeah.
And it never went back down. I suddenly was no longer a high functioning depressive. I was happy.
Yeah.
I'd not been happy since I was maybe 6 years old. Like, and it never went away. I mean, I'm not saying I don't have bad days, but I'm a happy guy who has bad days. I'm not sliding back into any kind of a thing. And I went back to my business partner. He called me like as soon as I got back, and he said, "Did you get it? Like, did you get the formula for whatever they do?" And I said to him, "I'm so sorry, dude. I drank the Kool-Aid. There's no formula. It's just, if you see what's really going on, it changes everything."
So
it has.
For people listening, so I'll see if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly. At that moment, you chose to rise up and out of that busy thinking, of that depressed thinking. You actually then saw...
Oh, no.
Okay.
There was no choice involved at all. I was drinking a beer, watching a video, waiting for it to be over so I could watch the baseball game.
So it just popped.
I heard truth. In the same way as when I was in that room and I got the busy signal from the suicide hotline, I saw something truer. I popped up the elevator. So yes, I had a shift in consciousness, but no, I didn't choose it.
Almost there.
And I don't think you can choose it. I think you can aim yourself in its direction. I think you can know that that is what will change things, and that orients you in a certain way. It gets you to look in a certain place. But you can't choose it. If you could choose it, we'd all be enlightened.
So it was almost like an epiphany.
Oh, it was a total epiphany. And I've had numerous ones since, though that was the biggie.
And that you put that down to coming from the sort of super field or the higher level of coming through?
I put that down to it being innate in human beings to have insight.
Yeah.
Like we're made to pop.
Yeah.
I use the analogy of popcorn a lot because you know that if you put it over heat, it'll pop because that's what popcorn does. But you can't say at which point which kernel will pop or why.
No.
And some kernels, no matter how much heat you put them over, will never pop, but very few. And some pop almost when the heat first comes on, and some don't pop until there's a critical mass. That's what working with people in this understanding is. And so my wife will sometimes say, if I'm down, my office is in my house, if I'm with a client, have they popped yet?
Yes.
Because she gets it. It's like I just know how to put the heat on.
Yes.
And then the popcorn pops because that's what popcorn does, not because I'm brilliant at putting the heat on.
And we're very much in the purpose conversation in this podcast. And by the sounds of things, listening to your story, it was almost like life was preparing you, because obviously that is now your life's work. You talk to people about the epiphany, so to speak. And it sounds like all the stuff that you were doing previously was leading up to that insight, which you've now dived into and obviously now have made your life's work.
Well, it certainly feels like that. I don't know if that's true, but it feels like that. Certainly, everything that I had done before that, training as an actor and doing that, and all the other things I'd studied, getting used to being in the field of coaching and developing a reputation in the field, and actually having a couple of books already at the point that I had that epiphany, that were based on my work up until that point, absolutely prepared me for this. Yeah. But is that why they happened? I don't know. I just don't. I mean, honestly, maybe life has had a purpose for me. I feel like I call it a soul path.
Yes, perfect.
Where it feels like your soul is laying the path in front of you, one paving stone at a time. Yeah. That's what it feels like. Mm. But I just always kind of feel the need to say, I don't know if that's true, but that is absolutely my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I think our soul is always trying to get us on to that soul path, and like you said, it's almost like a breadcrumb trail. You do the next thing, and then the next thing appears, and then the next thing appears, and slowly but surely.
And if you know that, and you see, this is one of the things that I do with clients as a coach, because I know it works that way. I can kind of, it's obvious to me when they're trying too hard or not doing what's there to be done. Because most people are acting as if it's up to me. I've got to put the world on my back and carry it where I want it to go. And that's just, that is so the hard way to get anywhere in life.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So if you were coaching somebody now who was confused, maybe a little bit lost around why they're here and what they're supposed to be doing, like, how would you support them?
Well, I mean, we'd start just by having a chat and chilling out. It's most people, when they come to me, there's two things that are in their way, and one is they're preoccupied with something, right? They're obsessing over something. Maybe it is purpose. Maybe it is, what am I supposed to do with my life? Is my kids that are at that age, right? I've got to solve this one problem before I can move forward. I've got to lose weight before I can start dating. I've got to make a certain amount of money before I can leave my job and start my business. I've got to, whatever it is. Mm. And I know that when they put that down, they'll come back to themselves. And then I'll have a person in front of me, not an obsession. Mm. Once I'm in a room with a person, we can have a conversation about how the mind works and how life works and how that impacts the things they want to do with their life. But there's no point in having that conversation when they're still preoccupied. Now the second thing that's true of almost everyone that comes into my office is they vastly underestimate the power of the mind. Mm. And I don't mean it in a magical sense. I mean that if the brain is a supercomputer, the mind is the infinite internet. Literally, the answer to anything is in it, whether you have any experience of it personally or not. And if you start to understand that, if you start to sense this incredible capacity we all have and what gets in the way of it, why we don't experience life that way all the time, it's remarkable the shift that engenders in people. Mm.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I think, I would agree with you. You have to empty people out because there's so much going on in their brains and their heads that you can't kind of get to the real them.
And it'll settle down by itself. I mean, that's, one of the reasons I tend to work with people over a few days initially, as opposed to just an hour, is because it takes a little while to settle down and stay settled. But once you do, so much becomes obvious about yourself and about your life that just isn't obvious when you're in the noise.
And is this your inside out philosophy as such?
Well, what I call the inside out understanding is based on understanding a fundamental truth about human perception, that we think we live in the world of circumstances, in the feeling of circumstances. Like, this situation is scary, this situation is sad, this situation is exciting, this situation is. But we live in a world of thought.
Yes. Yeah.
We are living in the feeling of thought, not the feeling of the world. So our experience is generated on the inside and then projected onto the world, onto the form. So that's what inside out means. We live from inside to out. But then we experience it back through the senses. So it's like if the mind is a projector, we project the film of thought onto the screen of consciousness, and then we watch the movie. And we experience the movie as if it's really happening, and it makes our heart beat when it looks scary, and it brings out our emotions when it looks sad. But it's all actually an experience of our own thought projected. But we act as though our mind is a camera, and what's happening is real, and our only choice is changing the way we look at it, changing our perspective, reframing it, whatever you want to do. Well, if you're the one who made the movie in the first place, getting better at coping with the movie isn't that helpful.
So what do they do?
What's that?
What do they do? What do we need to do?
Whatever they want. That's the beauty of it. Because look, it's the same thing. No, but you go to a movie. You've got to have had this experience of being so caught up in a movie, like sobbing or terrified, and then somebody's cell phone goes off.
Oh yeah, and it wakes you
and
up.
all of a sudden, you remember you're in a movie theater, and it totally wakes you up.
Yeah,
it's that. We are all living in those movies, but we don't know they're movies. We think they're real. And so what this conversation is, what the inside out understanding is it wakes you back up. It's the cell phone going off in the movie. Now, the great thing about movies is it doesn't mean you can't enjoy them when you know they're movies, right? Most of the time, you go into a movie. That's why you enjoy it. So it doesn't mean we stop enjoying our experience. It just means we don't get as overwhelmed or overcome by it. We don't feel the need to do battle with the dragons that only exist in our movie, and to strengthen ourselves, to protect ourselves against those dragons. And all the things that people do psychologically that actually, when you see what's really going on, why would I do that? Why would I need to be super strong to handle imaginary dragons?
So nice. Yeah, because I think we get so caught up in our stuff, don't we? That we get caught up in our thinking, we get caught up in the way we're seeing things, the way, like you said, you're projecting as such, or you're really living in that moment. We forget that we can just step back and step out of it and be, what would be the word I would use? Well, observe it almost.
Well, and again, I'm always very wary of it making it sound like you can do it by choice, right? It's not an empowered choice. I choose to see myself, because you do or you don't in any given moment. In any given moment, you're more or less aware of the nature of thought. You're more or less aware that you're living in a dream. You're more or less aware where your feelings are coming from. They're always coming from the same place. You're always in a dream, but it varies how aware of it. Now, when you're aware of it, you don't need to do anything because you're aware of it. When you're not aware of it, you can't do anything because you're not aware of it. If you're sort of aware of it, you can't do much because you're only sort of aware of it. So it really is about fostering an understanding, not developing a skill.
Yeah, I have to
when
say,
you see it, it's done.
yes.
It's like, oh, I'm in a movie. There's no practice for how to be in a movie. I'm in a movie. Got it.
Yeah. And I would say my meditation practice has enabled me to be a lot more present to that, because you see things happening, and you almost watch it happening, and then you choose what you want to react to, or you can almost delay the movie as such.
Well, and I think it's one of the two reasons that people meditate all over the world is one, it chills you out, right? So it gets you underneath the noise. Your thinking tends to settle when you're meditating. And two, there are those moments in meditation when you feel the true self. You feel that deeper part of you. You feel that okayness, that bit of you that was never born and can never die. And meditation isn't the only way to get there, but that's why people meditate. Like that's the pull.
Yeah, definitely, because it gives you almost a freedom that I don't experience without doing it. So for people listening, find a meditation practice.
Well, or not. I don't meditate.
Okay.
So that's why I say absolutely. That's why people meditate. But meditation is not the only way to experience it. The way I think about meditation is a description of a state of mind of stillness, of inner quiet, inner silence. How you get to that state of mind varies. So some people have a meditation practice, which is what they do to access that state of mind. What I've found is that through this understanding, people wind up living in states of meditation naturally more of the time because thought doesn't look the same to them. Thought doesn't look that real anyway, so they don't tend to get caught up in it, so they don't need a practice to get out of it.
Okay, interesting.
So it's the same aim to spend more of your time in these kind of more open, accessible, deeper states of mind, because people function better there.
Yeah.
The less you have on your mind, the better you do.
Yes.
But it's doing it without a particular practice, because people have an interesting relationship with practice. It works wonderful for some people, and everyone else beats themselves up because they can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Wonderful. And tell us about, you mentioned before we came on air about a new program that you are running.
Oh, well, it's not a new program, but I've been running a program since 2009 called Creating the Impossible, and the book just came out. Hay House just brought out the book version, which is called Creating the Impossible, a 90-day program to get your dreams out of your head and into the world.
Perfect for our audience.
Yeah. And that's the thing. As a coach, I've worked with so many people over the years, literally thousands of people, who have had the same dream for ages, or who say they don't have a dream, but you can see their eyes kind of go to a faraway place before they say it, which just lets you know, oh, they've shut it down. They've clamped down on it for some reason. And I just think it's a shame, because I think the reason people do that is they don't understand how creativity works. They don't understand that everything comes from nothing. So not having anything, not knowing how you're going to do it, isn't a problem. That's how it works. And so the whole book is there to help people see in a very practical way, on a practical project, oh, I don't need to know how it's going to work. I don't need to believe it's going to work. I don't need to believe in myself for it to work. I just need to start.
Yeah.
And then I need to follow the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, because I think, we're in a similar conversation, because obviously the purpose conversation, people get so busy and caught up in it, they don't even start. And what you're saying is you just start, and then the next piece of the puzzle comes in.
Yeah, and if you know that, you can dive in with abandon. If you don't know that, it seems scary.
Yes.
And so it's just one of those things. Once you see it, it's like, oh, it's just this again.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is so true. It's like a muscle, isn't it? Like I found that, just, I don't know, doing the podcast, doing the coaching, doing all the things that I now do and I take for granted because I've done them for quite a period of time. They didn't start like that. They were scary and intimidating to start with, but the action, one foot in front of the other, makes it easier. And then,
Yeah, and it's funny because it isn't the same for everyone in the sense that for some people it's really fun at the beginning and they don't find it scary at all, but then it gets to feel like work and then they stop. But that's part of the process, is the bit where it goes from inspiration to perspiration, from a great idea to doing the work. That's part of the game too.
mm,
So it's people have an idea that some people have an idea that it doesn't count unless it's really hard. Other people have the idea that it's not worth doing if it isn't really easy. To my mind, the question is, what do you want to create? And you'll find out how hard or easy it is along the way.
Yes, and I think most people don't even get that far because their
No,
dreams
absolutely right.
stay in their head because, and that's where coaches come in, isn't it? Because they are someone to support you and to help you facilitate what is inside, outside. And we all need a
Yeah,
person.
and most people think that what they're missing is discipline. Like that's the most common thing people say.
Mm.
In a way, they don't say it like this, but what they say to me is, "Hey, I'd like to hire you to make me do what I don't want to do." To which I go, "Why on earth would you do anything you don't want to do?"
Mm.
Like, if you don't want to create something, don't create it.
Mm.
If there's something that you think has to be done about creation that you don't want to do, then there's probably another way to do it that you would want to do.
Mm.
So this idea that it's my bad. The reason I'm feeling this way is because there's a block in me. It's self-sabotage. There's all of that stuff that you hear.
You're human.
Yeah, it isn't true in my experience. Everybody has doubts. Everybody gets nervy. Everybody tries things that don't work. Like that's not a big deal.
Mm.
The big deal is you think it's a big deal, so you stop going anywhere while you work on yourself. I've been around some of the most creative people certainly in America, in Hollywood, but actually all over the world. I got to tell you, psychologically, most of them are a mess.
Mm.
But boy, can they create cool shit in the world.
Mm.
Now, I'm all for both. I'm all for getting your head together as well as creating.
Mm.
But you don't have to have your head together in order to create. You
Mm.
just have to be able to get out of it long enough to go create something.
Mm. Yeah, and I think in my experience of creating, you won't necessarily you might have a vision and an idea, but you won't necessarily know all the pieces of the puzzle. You just, have to
Right.
start.
Whereas if people learn to goal set and, it all makes it sound like it should be so logical and you should see the path. Well, creating doesn't work that way
Mm.
because what you're creating doesn't already exist. So there isn't a path.
That's
You're
really.
literally bringing it into being.
Mm.
So it makes sense that you can't see how because it's invisible.
Mm. Yeah, and I've just experienced that myself because I'm launching my own course in May, Do Your Dharma course, and it's like it's been drip fed to me, the pieces.
Mhm.
And I knew what I wanted to do, the end goal, but I didn't necessarily know all the bits in between. And it's taken a year for it almost to be downloaded and for the puzzle to be completed.
And that's how it all worked. We just had I teach a Super Coach Academy, which is a training program for coaches, for transformative coaches. And we had a guy on one of the master classes yesterday, and he was the head of design for a big company. He left the company to start his own company, and his entire description of the creative process
Mm.
is exactly what we're saying. I mean, this is a top designer. He's got a company, a major new product line. And he said, yeah, we just knew what we wanted to see and we wanted to be part of bringing it into the world because it didn't exist.
Mm.
Like that's how it works.
Mm. Wonderful.
And see, people have these little goals that they think they can pull off. Well, if you can pull it off, it's not even, you don't even need a goal. Like if I want to go to the shop, I don't need to set a goal of going to the shop. I just go to the shop. Right? The only reason we kind of set goals is things that are beyond us, beyond what we think we can do. And that's when you start to learn about this creative force that comes through us. That's where you start to learn about this unfolding or drip feeding or however you experience it. That's the norm. It's 100% reliable. It's just 98% unpredictable what form it will take.
And we shouldn't necessarily try and because I think what comes through is usually 100-fold what we expect. You know, we can't necessarily describe it because it's usually much better than we anticipate.
One of the just beautiful moments that happened in one of the academy trainings this was probably back years ago, 2012 or something. We had a guy we used to call Mr. President because he was in the military, and he just was a guy that you hope one day will grow up and want to be president. Just a good guy all the way around. But he held himself to an impossibly high standard. Like, he was always down on himself. And one day it just occurred to me to say to him, "Oh, I think I see what the problem is. You think you're in charge. You think you're the pilot, but you're not the pilot, you're the plane. We are the vehicle for this creative force. We aren't in charge of where it goes. We can take it, we can hijack it, right? We can take it over and fly it somewhere else.
Yeah.
But that's not the design. That's not what we're meant to be doing. That's not how it's set up."
No, I think I that would be that going back on your soul path. You know, that it's the soul that is, you're the vehicle effectively for what it is your soul wants.
Yeah, and you have free will. You can say, "No, I will not do what would deeply fulfill me and make the world a better place. I want to do this." And you can, and it's hard and it's a struggle, but you can do it. And the second you let go, that little prompting will come back, that little nudge, and this time maybe you'll follow it.
Yeah.
It's like the GPS, right? The GPS doesn't care how many times you ignore it. It doesn't get louder when you don't turn where it tells you to turn. It just says recalculating, and it gives you a different way to get there from where you are now.
And I've also experienced it where I've ignored it. You know, I've ignored the GPS, and I've ignored my intuition, I've ignored my soul. And you can only ignore it for so long before the universe takes corrective action. And depending on how much you're ignoring it, I've experienced bigger recorrections.
Right. Which in a funny way takes you off the hook even more, because even if you never listen, life's going to do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so you're off the hook. Like, yeah, it'll probably be more pleasant if you tune in earlier and listen and follow, but you can wait. It'll get you there anyways.
And it's exactly what we're doing with our podcast, Michael, is to try and get people on that soul path as quick as possible. So they don't have to struggle and they don't have to experience that pain. But
well, I prefer that way. I gotta be honest. I've tried both.
Oh, Michael, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. What a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you coming on Kitty Talks, sharing your story and your knowledge. I know this conversation will have been of real value to our listeners. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And we will have all of Michael's details in the show notes. So you will be able to find him, follow him, and obviously all the details of his new book, Creating the Impossible. So please do connect with him, and we will see you again next week on Kitty Talks. Bye-bye.
This podcast was sponsored by my Do Your Dharma course. Create a life so good that you pinch yourself. This 8-week online course demystifies Dharma and shows you how to tune in to why you're really here. Go to www.kittytalks.com/do your Dharma.